Welcome to Compelling Conversation. This is your host, Dush Ramachandran, and my guest today is Ryan Gottfredson, who is assistant professor, at Cal State University in Fullerton, and the author of the new book, Success Mindsets, Your Keys to Unlocking Greater Success in Your Life, Work, and Leadership. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. I like seeing you hold my book there.
Yeah.
It's not officially out just yet while we're recording it, so not many people have their hands on it. So you got a pre-release copy.
I'm one of the fortunate few that has an early copy. And, that brings us to a key point. This is a fabulous book for the time we're in because, with the pandemic and with everybody being locked down, et cetera, there's a lot of concern. I mean, people are feeling unmotivated. People are feeling, like out of sorts. They don't really know how to work with the current circumstances. And a lot of people are fearful for their career, for their jobs. What's going to happen? When are we going to get back to work again? What's the economy going to look like? Is my job going to survive? All of these various uncertainties are affecting a lot of people. So this book is very timely at this time. And you talk about the mindsets, either an entrepreneur or a business owner or any kind of professional needs to have in order to be successful. So you talk about sort of 4 different sets of mindsets. So if you wouldn't mind, would you just walk us through what those two opposites are in 4 of those categories?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I think you're right. Our mindsets, what they are is there are mental lenses that shape how we view the world. And so how we view the world shapes how we operate in the world. So if we see the world as though the sky is falling, we're going to think about it and behave in different ways than if we see the world in such that new opportunities are presenting themselves. And so that's at a very basic level. But as you alluded to, in my book, I focus on 4 different sets of mindsets, not because these are mindsets that I've created or that I've seen others create. These are the 4 sets of mindsets that have received significant research attention. In fact, all of these sets have received 30 plus years of research attention. And what I've done is I've just compiled them into one framework. And each of these sets of mindsets exist on a continuum, such there's a negative side and a positive side.
Sure.
So at a very high level, we have fixed and growth. So fixed is on the negative side, growth on the positive, closed and open, prevention and promotion, and inward and outward. And what these are is they're just lenses in which we see the world in unique ways, and that'll predict how we process and behave depending upon our mindsets.
That's really fascinating because I went through the book and I could think of, companies and people that, in our own lives, and I'm sure our viewers, people who are watching this show, can also identify with these different mindsets. So let's take an example of the first couple that you mentioned.
Yeah, and let me even bring up an example from my book. And I don't know how many football fans are listening to this, but there's a former football player at Texas A&M who at the time he was there was the biggest name in college football. His name was Johnny Manziel. He was the first player to ever win the Heisman Trophy as a freshman. And so he played quarterback and he just had unreal athletic capabilities. But the thing that's interesting about Johnny Manziel is that he had a fixed mindset. And what this meant for him is that he didn't believe that he could change his talents, abilities, and intelligence. So he saw the world in terms of haves or have-nots, and he saw himself as a have. And being a have, when he would get suggestions from his coaches about how he could improve, he would wave them off. I don't need this because I'm a have. Only people who are not haves need your help and support. And so he was able to succeed at Texas A&M without even knowing their playbook. And so this is a
Just
really remarkable
pure
feat, and it
athletic
speaks to
ability.
his athleticism.
Yeah.
And then he goes on to get drafted by the Cleveland Browns, and very quickly he's in a whole new world. He didn't study the playbook coming into the season because he didn't feel like he had to. And while his teammates were impressed with his athletic ability, he was falling far short because he wasn't on the same page as everybody else. And that ultimately limited his success. So with that fixed mindset, he became unwilling to invest in himself, whereas those with the growth mindset, that's their primary focus, is investing in themselves.
That's fascinating. So, if you think about even companies, there are lots of companies we can think of that have a fixed versus a growth mindset, and closed versus an open mindset. An example that comes to mind immediately is Kodak. And a lot of people probably don't realize that Kodak actually invented the digital camera. Even though they were in the film business, a couple of their engineers in their lab figured out the first digital camera with the first digital sensor. But because they were so concerned that a digital camera would cannibalize their film business, they suppressed it. They didn't allow it to move forward. And the digital camera came along anyway, regardless of whether Kodak wanted it or not, and decimated their film business. Whereas they could have been a leader had they, created a digital division and run that parallel, allowed the film business to sunset, and allowed the digital business to continue. But there's a lesson in that for all of us. So give us another example of so a couple of the other continuums.
Well, let me even just build off of that example, because I think it's really, because if we understand Kodak, the way where they got the majority of their revenue was from film sales,
Sure.
not the cameras themselves.
Right.
And so when they develop this digital camera, that's essentially taking them completely out of the film business. That's going to drive away all the revenues. So when you look at it from that perspective, it seems to make sense, the decision that they made to not bring out this digital technology. And the same thing goes with each of our mindsets, because I've learned for myself that I've been on the negative side of each of these continuums. But even while I'm on the negative side, I still think that how I see the world is the best way to see the world.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't necessarily make us effective. And so to build off of that, let me even give you a personal example associated with the next set of mindsets, which is the difference between a prevention mindset and a promotion mindset.
Right.
So when I was in high school, I felt like I was very promotion minded. I had some really clear goals. I played athletics. The goals were largely around athletics. And then I tried to walk on to a basketball team at the college level, and I got cut on the last cut. And this was really demoralizing to me.
Sure.
I'm now living away from home. I'm now feeling rudderless without basketball in my life. And I just kind of came to realize that life is difficult living on your own. And I developed this prevention mindset, which was that I was primarily focused on avoiding problems. So my thought was, if I could avoid problems, then I'm going to be successful. And so some ways in which I did this throughout my adult life was I tried to stay away from debt as much as I could. I graduated with my undergrad and PhD without any debt. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur because I saw that as being far too risky.
Right.
And I think I became a professor because I saw it as being a safe bet.
Sure.
Like, yeah, I'd be doing things that I would like, but it was safe in terms of I wouldn't have to break my back, in terms of working long hours, a good work-life balance, and you get paid a decent amount. And so I was plugging along as a professor, and just things weren't gelling for me at the time. And I was kind of blaming it on external factors. And during this time, I was given a book by a CEO friend of mine. And here's the book here. It's called The 5-Minute Journal.
Oh, yeah.
And sounds like you're familiar with it.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
And he hands it to me and says, "This book is going to change your life." And I'm looking at him, and I'm very gracious, but inside my head I'm thinking, there is no way I am journaling. Like, it's not going to happen. I'm not a journaler. So I bring it home and I open it up and I see that it just invites you to ask 3 questions of yourself every morning.
Right.
And the questions are, what are 3 things you're grateful for? What are 3 things that would make today amazing? And then fill in some self-affirmations. And I said, I'll give this a shot. I'll just do it for 2 weeks.
Sure.
And if there's benefits, great. If there's not, really no harm done. So I started doing it. And I very quickly started to feel a shift in my mindset, because every day, rather than being focused on avoiding problems, I started to develop this promotion mindset where I was focused on winning and gains. How do I make today better than yesterday? How do I make this week more amazing than last week?
Right.
And it's that shift that I made that ultimately led me to start up my own consulting business, write my book, and us to have this conversation. And without that, we would have never been here.
Fabulous. You know, that's such a great story because it connects many, many points, as many things do in this world. It just proves that we live in a connected universe, because I actually know the guys that put together the 5-Minute Journal.
You need to connect us. I'm their biggest fan.
Yeah, and I will. I absolutely will. They're really great guys, and they put the journal together from basically feeling this want in their own lives, in saying, how can I, as I get to work, as I wake up in the morning, what can I do to make sure that my day goes the way I would like it to go? Yes, of course, you're going to run into, challenges along the way. Emergencies, problems are going to come along. You can't avoid that. This is the human condition. However, what can I do to make sure that I have the right attitude, and in your words, the right mindset that will allow me to go through life with the least amount of pain possible? And this was to solve their own need that they put that together. And I think you'll enjoy meeting them, and I'll be sure to connect you.
Yeah, I would love to connect with them. Yeah, they do some great stuff.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So in your research, in putting together the book, you must have interviewed a lot of people. And what were some of the insights from these interviews that came out? What stood out to you as, it would have probably, as you were going through this research, I'm sure it created aha moments for you, and it probably did the same for the people that you were interviewing. As you go through the dialogue with them, they think about it and go, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. This is my mindset. So give us some examples or some stories of how that might have influenced the book.
Yeah, one of the things that I did, and it was focused on this prevention versus promotion mindsets, is right. I met with different managers in different organizations, and also their subordinates. And I would meet with the manager first, and the first question that I would ask them is what is your purpose in your role?
Sure.
And I got the same reaction every time. They would sit back and say, that's a good question. And so they didn't have a purpose that was front of mind. And so then they would go back to, and then they essentially, you could see the wheels turning, that they were going back to their job description. Sure. They're kind of thinking, what is on my job description? And so that was an interesting insight. Then I would go to their subordinates and I would ask their subordinates, what is your manager's purpose? And they would do the same exact thing. Good question. And you could say, what is their job description? And so what I learned from this is, and there's other research to back this up, is that most people don't have a clear purpose for their life. In fact, there's a Harvard Business Review article that says that only 20% of top-level business leaders have a clear individualized purpose. And so when we have a purpose, that's necessary for having the promotion mindset. But when we don't have a clear individualized purpose, our default will become a prevention mindset of some sort,
Sure.
that we're trying to limit problems, limit difficulties, as opposed to reach goals. And so that was a really interesting takeaway in some of my research, is just how prevalent it is that even top level business leaders may not have a purpose, which influences how they make decisions and how they behave. And they're going to be less likely to achieve their goals with that default prevention mindset than with the promotion mindset.
Right. And do you think that is more a case of they're not having a purpose, or having a purpose but not quite understanding it or knowing it in a concise way that they could articulate to you?
I think it's a combination of the both, and I think
Sure.
it really depends on the person. I think what ends up happening, and this is getting back to Stephen R. Covey's work with the 7 habits,
Sure.
but he's got his 4 quadrants that are broken down on urgent and important. And I think that oftentimes we're just incentivized, because of all of the responsibilities that we have, to fall into this urgent and important quadrant.
Sure.
And when we're there, we're just fighting fires, but we're not ultimately very effective at making progress towards our long-term goals. To do that, we've got to be in the important and not urgent quadrant.
Right.
And it's only there that we could take aside the time to really develop this individualized purpose for ourselves. And what that'll do is that'll set the direction for everything that we do. So I don't think that people kind of say, I don't need a purpose. I think a lot of times they don't give themselves the time, devote the time and the energy to developing that and to letting that kind of infiltrate who they are.
Right. And so now we understand that there are these 4 sets of mindsets, right? Prevention versus promotion, closed versus open, and so on. So if you were to provide a prescription, so how do we get out of this? How do we make sure, because we may be adopting mindsets, or we may have preformed mindsets that we got through our upbringing, our school, our society, people that we've interacted with, our family, etc., where we may have these mindsets without quite realizing that we do have them. So what's a good way for someone to examine their own mindsets and say, so what is my mindset in this context? Is it open, or is it closed? Is it promotion, or is it prevention? How would you sort of move from the negative quadrant to the positive one?
You brought up such a great point. So what you identified and what you said is the number one thing that we have to do in order to shift our mindsets is we've got to become aware of our mindsets.
Exactly.
And we've got to be aware of the mindsets that we need to have. So that's why this mindset framework, I think, is so helpful for people, is because it puts labels on things that we haven't had labels for before. And in my book, as well as on my website, I have a free mindset assessment that people could take. It's 20 questions. And then what it does is it compares their results to the 10,000 plus other people who have taken the assessment. And it tells them, where do you fall in across these 10,000 other people? And so we get very objective data about where our mindsets currently are. And then as a part of the results, I provide direction on how we can improve our mindsets.
Beautiful. So it's not necessarily something that, you read the book and it sounds interesting, but you don't know where you sit on the continuum. So you say, oh, that's cool, and you move along. But this is beautiful, because everybody has an opportunity to self-assess and see where they are in the continuum on each of those 4 scales, if you will, and then get a personalized sort of curriculum, if you will, to figure out how they move into the positive side of the equation. That's wonderful. So just so we don't forget, what is the website that people can go to get that? And we'll put the link in the show.
Yeah, perfect. So it's ryangottfredson.com. And there you could find that assessment, as well as you can get a whole bunch of freebies associated with my book.
And Gottfredson spelled Gottfredson. Is that correct?
Perfect. Yep, correct. You got it.
RyanGottfredson.com. Okay, perfect. We'll put that link in there so people can see it. So that'll be helpful. So this is great, Ryan. So now, so you've got the book that talks about the 4 different mindset continuums, and then you've got the self-assessment that takes people, helps them assess where they are, and then gives them a way by which they can get to the right area. What about, do you engage with people individually? Do you work with people? Do you work with companies on a consulting basis or anything like that?
Definitely. And that's the main thing that I do in terms of my consulting practice is I work with organizations to develop their leaders and also their culture. And so what I often do with organizations is I will have them take my mindset assessment in advance. So maybe we have the top 30 leaders of an organization. They'll take my mindset assessment. And then I'll come in to do a training or a workshop around these mindsets to help them to learn about them and awaken to them. And it's a really powerful experience because these leaders are now doing an introspective dive that is deeper than they've ever gone before. And then to cap that all off, what I'll do, because they've already taken the assessment, is I'll aggregate their results up to the collective level.
Sure.
And so we could see as an entire group, where are our mindsets on this continuum from negative to positive? And I've done this with probably 60 different groups. And I've only had one group that has been on the positive side for all 4 sets of the mindsets. And I would say that 80% of these groups have actually been, have either 3 or all 4 on the negative side of the continuum. So it's not too uncommon for us to be on the negative side, which suggests that this should be a prime area for us to focus, because if we could shift our mindsets, we'll improve how we think, learn, and behave within the organization and create a much more healthy culture.
Sure. And to what do you ascribe the fact that most organizations, people actually are in the negative side of it? Is that culture? Is it background? What is it? Do you have any clues as to why that happens?
Well, I think, yeah, it's culture. It's culture on multiple levels. It's organizational culture. It's society culture.
Sure.
And to drive this point home, let me give you 4 desires.
Beautiful. Please.
And you tell me if these are good or bad desires to have, okay? So we got a desire to look good, a desire to be right, a desire to avoid problems, and a desire to get ahead.
Right.
Do these seem like bad desires?
They don't on the face of it, no.
Yeah, not on the face of it, because who wants to look bad, be wrong, have problems, and get passed up? Well, nobody.
Right.
So these desires are very common for leaders to have, and they're very justifiable.
Right.
But what we don't recognize is that they're actually very negative, and they're attached to the negative mindsets. And the reason why they're negative is we need to consider, where is their focus? Their focus is all on themselves. And what we need is leaders that are focused not on themselves, but on the organizations, the people they lead. And so there's 4 desires that are associated with the 4 positive mindsets. So instead of a desire to look good, we should have a desire to learn and grow. Instead of a desire to be right, we should have a desire to find truth and think optimally. When we have instead of having a desire to avoid problems, we should have a desire to reach goals.
Sure.
And instead of a desire to get ahead, we should have a desire to lift others. And so when we look at these different sets of desires, when we're on the negative side, we're really in self-protection mode.
Sure.
And as we make the shift to the more positive desires and mindsets, we move into organization advance mode.
Sure.
And I think a lot of times we're just not in organization advance mode, just because we don't understand that there's these higher order desires and mindsets to have.
Sure. Well, and then the other thing that happens, as I'm sure you've found in your research, is that within organizations, um, the if you don't look good and if you don't protect yourself, you're severely punished by people around you, either by the fact that you get beaten down, you get passed over, whatever. There are few organizations, but they are too few that actually respect the search for the truth and that actually respect and honor someone who is actually standing up to say, I made a mistake and I need to do better at this, and I will learn and go forward. When somebody stands up and says, yeah, I made a mistake, that's an invitation to get fired in a lot of organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you know, that comes naturally, and it's something that people come by honestly. But I think your book is extraordinarily powerful, especially at a time like this, where, you know, I think it feels like all of corporate culture, all of society is undergoing a massive upheaval. And if we have this opportunity to kind of hit the reset button and just change the way we do things, there are already things happening where it's unlikely that we will ever go back to the old normal. But
Mm-hmm.
this is a great way to start, you know, where we start with moving ourselves into the right side of the equation. That would be tremendously powerful. So, Ryan, when does the book come out?
Yeah, so the book officially comes out May 5th, which for us is 4 days away. And it's been a really great week for me. We've had the ebook and audiobook out since February, and the book has just caught on. And this last week, in fact, just yesterday, I found out that the book hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list for ebooks, and then also the USA Today bestseller list. So I think to your point, is this is something that people are feeling like we really need right now, and so they're latching onto it.
Congratulations on both the Wall Street Journal and the USA Today. And yeah, this is absolutely topical, very, very of the time. This is the need of the hour. And thank you for putting this out. We really appreciate it. And thank you for spending the time with us today. And to our listeners, thank you so much for watching. RyanGottfredson.com. The book is Success Mindsets. Grab a copy. I found this absolutely riveting, and I think you will too. And if you like this episode, please go ahead, hit a like, and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when we put out future episodes. Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You're doing some great work, and I just feel an honor to be a part of it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.